Hello students, I'm just wanting to go through how to solve mathematical problem solving and modelling tasks in the new senior curriculum in Queensland. Basically, there are four elements that you'll come across. We start off with an introduction is a criterion called formulate. The body of the solution, in other words, all the working, is the solve section. We have the conclusion, which is evaluate and verify, and there's one other called communication. And the communication will be examined in all three parts. So we will see the communication throughout everything. And so what I'm wanting to do today is to actually show you how you can um, reflect on your work and know that you are solving the problem and that you're going to get the best marks possible. Now, the first criterion we're going to look at is something called formulate. And you'll see formulate as called a criterion. Now, if we look here, you'll see that there are certain dot points. And up the top, we have a box and it has marks of 3 to 4. Now, I've said here, you're not trying to satisfy all 6 dot points, but just the top 3. In other words, your aim is to be able to tick off to say, yes, I have been able to show documentation of appropriate assumptions, accurate documentation, accurate translation. You're aiming to achieve those. If you don't quite get there, so that's what your teachers, all they're doing is they're looking, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done that? If you've done all three of those, then you will get 4 as your mark. If you've done two of them very well and a bit of the other one maybe, you could end up with 3. If you've done one of them, um, there starts to be a judgment call. But basically, as long as you check that you have done all of those, you will get 4 marks. If you've done, say, 2 of them, you would end up with 3 marks. And then, for example, you'll see that the second one says accurate documentation of relevant observations, and the second one, statement of some relevant observations. See how they're related? So in other words, if you do a really good job with all the relevant observations, yes, you get ticked off in the top. If you do some, but it's not really a comprehensive statement of the observations needed, then you would end up being ticked off on this one, and that's the way your teachers will be marking it. So the first part of the criterion that I want to look at is documentation of appropriate assumptions. So I bump that. It means basically that I am going to um, make sure that the teacher knows what I'm thinking needs to happen, what are the conditions that have to be true in order to solve this problem. So you can't just say, oh, the day is sunny, to say that that's an assumption. I'm assuming that the day is sunny. So you might be, for example, in essential maths, driving onto a beach and you need it to be sunny so that they don't get bogged on the beach. So your assumption can't just be, it is sunny. You need to give a reason why. I'm assuming it's sunny, otherwise the car might get bogged on the beach. And so um, you have a reason behind it. So, for example, in this one, I'm assuming that it's a sunny day. So, looking down here at the example, assuming it's a sunny day, as if it was raining, the athletics carnival would be postponed. So, it's good to actually state that you're doing assuming, is state my assumptions are, and give a reason for it. Okay, so that's appropriate assumptions. Note that it's plural. So make sure you do more than one, and I'm sure you can find a few. The next one I'm going to look at is accurate documentation of relevant assumptions. So a key term here is the term relevant. Okay, it has to make sense. It has to be important to it. Accurate means that what does it say? Accurate, precise and exact to the point, consistent with exactly conforming to a truth. Okay, so I've got definitions down here. So I've gone, oh, what is accurate? I can look down here to say, well, accurate means that it's spot on. That's the way my father would say that it is uh, on mark. It's you're doing the right thing. You found something specific to. That's all ways of looking at accurate. So in this case, I've said, okay, here's an example for accurate. In order to obtain the best times in the 100-meter sprints, we'll position the race start so that the wind comes from behind the runners. So it's relevant because I'm trying to, in this assignment, it might be asking me to, how would I set up an athletics carnival? And so it's relevant to obtain the better time that we make sure that the wind comes from behind the runners. So we put the start so that the wind's behind the runners. And so I've documented it with reasons. Get that? Documentation means that it's not just writing something down, it's putting some sort of reason with it. And the third one here, which is the accurate translation, okay? Accurate translation of all aspects of the problem by identifying mathematical concepts and techniques. You need to remember that this is a mathematics assignment. And so it's important that you make sure that you look at what mathematics I need to use. You might need to say things like, in order to solve this problem, I'll be using areas of shapes, and I'll be looking at percentages. We'll need to work out, so you actually a bit of an outline of what you're going to do in order to solve it. So you need to identify what mathematics you use and be specific in order to solve the problem. Does that make sense? So what mathematics you need to use in order to solve the problem. So in this formulate section, you worked out, this is my problem, this is how I'm going to solve it. You're not solving it in this, but you're saying, this is what I'm going to do to solve the problem. I had a young student a couple of years ago, and she used to actually write down how to solve the problem, but unfortunately, quite often she never actually solved it. She just wrote down how to solve it. And so she'd actually get some marks for that because she identified how to solve the problem. She just didn't know how to use the skills or show the skills to solve it. What does that mean? So the next one is called solve. Now solve, the criterion solve, is about actually doing the main work, doing what's involved to solve this, to get your solution. Okay? And again, there's 11 points, but the reality is you want to get your best mark possible. So you're going to aim for satisfying the top three. And you'll see the first one says use the complex procedures to produce an accurate solution. The second one says a reasonable solution. That's the difference. Accurate, meaning that it's spot on, you've got the right solution and it's very clear. Reasonable means it's pretty close. It's not exactly perfect, but you've got a solution that is approximately good. It's very close to the thing. And then you'll see down the bottom, instead of complex procedures, you'll see the word simple. And so the top point of each of those all relate to the same thing. And so we're going to aim to look at what do we do to get this. We're not going to aim for 4 to 5. We're not going to aim for 2 to 3. But the reality is you may think that you have got an accurate solution, and it'll depend on how you go with that. And that's where your teacher's work will come in. So they're going to look at your solution and go, did you do it simply but not really get there? Have you got a solution that's pretty close, and you've done it a decent way. And the last one is, well, have you done it a decent way, and did you get the correct solution? So that's what that's about. So real, I've explained that one. So you're basically trying to get a correct solution and use correct procedures to do it. The next one, which is discerning application. Here we go. Discerning application of mathematical concepts and techniques relevant to the task. Now that's all funny words, and for some of you may not like a lot of the English, um, but I've outlined what's discerning, apply to help you with application, relevant, what does that mean? So this dot point refers to how you solve the question. Is the way you solved it the most efficient method to solve it, or is there a better way to solve your problem? Have you used mathematics relevant to the task? Indicates that you haven't used a whole lot of unnecessary math. So that's another thing, is just because you put more into an assignment, you write more stuff down, if it's actually completely irrelevant, that's actually not using discerning application. That's just trying to throw a whole lot of stuff in to see if you can get a better mark because it looks bigger. Okay, it's actually got to be clear, precise, and that's what that's about. Now the last one here is to do with technology, efficient use of technology. So you'll see we've got efficient use, appropriate use up the top here, and then superficial use. So efficient use is what we're aiming for. Efficient means that you're using technology in the best way possible. I've used an example, is if you're given a spreadsheet and you're using a spreadsheet allows you to use folders. If you use it the best way possible, you'll use formulas throughout it. That's efficient use. So you're using formulas, using it correctly. So you're using the spreadsheet correctly. That's what I mean. Now, if you're doing an appropriate use of technology, you might do some formulas, a bit here and a bit there, but not really using it to its full potential. Well, that's appropriate use of technology, but it's not great. And then superficial would be, for example, if someone just used a calculator and typed numbers into a spreadsheet because they were told to use a spreadsheet. Well, they're not really using a spreadsheet as a spreadsheet. They're just using it as a display. So that's really superficial. They're not really showing any use of knowledge of what a spreadsheet does or how to use it. So that sort of makes sense about that one. I talk as if you're going to respond to me, but that's just the way I am. Okay, criterion, evaluate and verify. So this is important. So what do we got here? We've got evaluate and verify. Oops, I used a spray gun. That's what we're looking at. Again, the top three is what we're aiming for. I've put little definitions of keywords to help you to work that out. Now, talk to you a little bit about this. It's your conclusion. Evaluate and verify is your conclusion. What I got taught by a history teacher a long time ago, introduction is where we outline what our assignment is about, what our essay is about, what our problem is about. And so introduction will outline in mathematics what is our problem and how are we going to solve it. The next part, which is the body or the solution or solve, is where we actually do the solution to the project, to the problem. So solve, by this stage, before you get to evaluate and verify, you have solved the problem. You have an answer or have the answers. Evaluate and verify is basically, I got taught that you think of it a bit like rewriting the introduction. So the introduction, we talked about assumptions and observations. Now we're going to reflect on them. We're going to say what's good about it and what's bad about it, what worked, what didn't work. And so that's the key, is you're actually going to look at your introduction. So your conclusion is a revamp of your introduction, reflecting on what worked and what didn't work. That makes sense? So here I've got a little note here. In this section you can identify that your initial assumptions proved to be incorrect and how they needed to be changed. Uh, Strengths is what works well, limitations what didn't work so well. You could also put, I haven't put this in here, but I'm just thinking now, you could actually show that your initial assumptions must have been correct. So from your results, you might actually be able to say, well, my assumptions must have been correct because, not just, so this is the thing, you got to see, it's not just right, um, my assumption was correct. My assumption must be correct because um, the car didn't get bogged. I don't know, that's just being stupid. The car didn't get bogged. Anyhow, because we talked about a car, I talked about a car going up a beach. So that's what your evaluate and verify is about. So your conclusion is a revamp of your introduction, reflecting on um, good, bad, how the assumptions. So you need to actually talk about each assumption and each observation within your evaluate and verify, okay, to be comprehensive. And lucky last is communicate. Now, I see two key things in communicate. The first one is, again, it's the top two that we're looking for. The first one, correct use of mathematical, statistical, and everyday language and conventions to develop the response. What does that mean? That basically means, how have you written a response? So how did you write it? Your solution's got to be logical and show mathematics with correct working and correct language. In other words, have you written clearly and logically? Is your how you've written it well? I can speak well. Is how you've written it correct and logical? And also, is the working, because this is a maths assignment, is your working correct? Have you actually shown correct working? The second part of this is coherent and concise organisation. In other words, how is it set out? Okay, how have you set out your response? Have you got a introduction, which is your formulate? Have you done your body, which is your solve? And have you done your conclusion as evaluate and verify? And of course, your communication will be within that. Now, also remember, and remember this for everything, to get the best result possible, you want to write it in such a way that it makes it easy and clear for people to identify your answers. So by clearly identify what you're doing, actually helps the person marking to clearly see that you have been able to formulate, you have been able to solve, and you have been able to evaluate and verify. So labeling is very important. Okay, I hope that is useful. Please speak to your teachers. Um, I just thought I'd give that as a bit of a help. Read through the definitions, that might help you as well. Just just working through, and do your formulate, do your introduction. You don't need to do it all at once. Break it down into its parts. Then after working out what you've got to do, then solve it. So once you've completed solving it, then look at evaluate and verify. And the last thing is, I would then check that you have communicated. So checking your communication after you've done it all to make sure that you've satisfied those relevant points. Enjoy.